An important part of language development is creating a language-rich environment at home. I don't know how to do that as well as she does. Vicki, you're a speech-language pathologist.
Yes, I am.
You've been in practice for what, 2 decades now?
Something like that, yeah.
And you know a lot more about this than I do. So help us out. How do we create a language-rich environment at home?
Well, there are several things that we can do. And one of the very first ones that I would say is read out loud to your child every single day. Read out loud. It is so important. So there's a couple of things that you're going to be doing within that reading out loud. Now I'm talking, you don't have to wait until they're talking to read out loud. Start from the very, very first. We got a picture the other day of our son. He had his 2-month-old daughter on his lap and he was reading. Read from the very, very start. As they get older, you can do a lot of fun things with that reading. You can do predictive reading. What do you think is going to happen next? Should we turn the page and see? You do some predictions. You do some, you can look at emotions. Look at that. He's getting so mad. Why do you think he's mad? And you can go through the thoughts that are going through his head. You can, another thing that's even great, you have a chance to even talk about the front cover and look, here's the title and this is who drew it. Wouldn't it be fun to draw? How would you have drawn this book? What could you have done differently?
I have a question, Vicki.
Yeah.
As you're talking about this, I'm seeing that this obviously enhances a child's ability to gain literacy, the ability to read. But we're talking also about language development. Can you connect the dots there for us?
There is a big tie between language and literacy. Within literacy, especially in books, there's a lot of rhyming and alliteration, and that has a big influence on how we learn to read. So when you're talking with a child, maybe you're reading a story with them and you start doing some word play, you do some rhyming, cat, sat, mat, and they start to hear word chunks like that at, that is a literacy building skill.
Right.
Because when they're learning to read, they learn to just change that first letter and they have, well, I guess in the video it'd be first letter and the chunk right here. So you're going to have that learning of literacy that goes with it. It's so important to do word play. So we want to do things like the rhyming, but also the alliteration. So Pat has a pickle and is sitting on a pillow. You might, while you're driving in the car, you're going to just play games. Let's see all the things, look out the window and see all the things that have pa, pa, pa in it. Let's go. And
now you used a sound rather than a letter.
Yeah, in case you haven't noticed, in English you can spell sh a whole lot of ways. T-I-S-H-C-C-H-S. So you're not worried about the letters of the alphabet. You're talking about the sounds. You're trying to bring the awareness to actually the building blocks of speech and literacy. And that will help in both the language and the literacy.
When you mentioned the wordplay, the alliteration, the rhyming, this psychologically also triggers predictive speech and language because they can anticipate, okay, there's going to be a word here that rhymes with the one that was just said.
Right.
And then they begin to predict and anticipate, which is an important part of language development as well.
And that's actually even one of the ways you can do reading. A book that you've read more than once, and please read them over and over and over again.
Repetition.
I know you've probably
Absolutely.
read, what is the one that we used to...
The Golden Bear.
Golden Bear,
Go Dog Go.
65 times.
Dr.
But then
Seuss, everything he ever wrote.
Pause for a second and let them finish the word. And that's a really great literacy skill as well as language development skill.
Our granddaughter can pretty much recite entire books now.
Yeah.
Even though she doesn't have the reading skills yet, she can recite the book because of the repetition that she's had. And it gives her a sense of confidence as she's going through that book and telling you what it says. So that is another reason we want to do the repetition. It increases the confidence and their sense of self because they're able to do that.
This brings me to something that a lot of parents aren't as familiar with. It's something called narration of your activities, okay? Of your activity or the child. So while you're playing, this is of course more common with a really young child who's just developing speech. Something a lot of parents don't know, you've got to have about 50 words before you start to put them together to make phrases. So you got to have bottle, ball, up, daddy, mommy, Got to have about 50 of
them.
those before you're going to say, Daddy, bye-bye, Daddy, work, Mommy, help, put two together. And so while you're playing with your child or doing whatever you're doing, even while you're cooking dinner, you can be narrating, Mommy's pouring the tomato sauce in, I'm going to stir, going round and round. It seems really silly, but you're narrating. But you do that with your child. Here goes the car, going up, 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 up. Here it goes, down. And you're narrating what you're doing. Now,
this ties the language to what the child is experiencing in the moment.
And it's the words that are most likely for them to develop first because they're the words that you're seeing and experiencing in your day-to-day activity.
Right.
Now, I want you to notice that while I was talking about it, about my actions and narrating, I did not use baby talk. I used real adult speech. But I did use something called parent ease. So
there's a difference.
There's a big difference. Baby talk is when, what do we want to do? And you change the way you say it. You maybe change the way you do your sounds. Mispronounce on purpose or use improper grammar to be like
baby
a baby.
talk.
That's baby talk. That is not helpful. Parent ease, I may shorten my sentences. I may give a little bit more time
you
between
become much
things,
more
go
animated,
a little bit slower, and stress words. You can say, when you're trying to teach a new vocabulary word, so say I'm working on up, you might say that 17 times in a 2-minute play session. And it's not too much. So you're going to use parent ease, which is simplified a little bit, shorter, slower, more emphasized. But you're still going to talk like an adult. Use adult speech to them. That brings us into one of the last techniques I wanted to highlight, and that is talk to your child.
Talk to them
one-on-one. There is so much research. I wish I had the exact numbers, but the number of words that a child hears before they really develop their own vocabulary is this really huge number. They have to hear those words. But the research also shows that it can't be overheard words. So you and I are having a discussion and the child is on the floor. Those are overheard words. Those don't
because
play.
We're not talking to the child
we're not talking to them. And so the number of words that the child actually hears spoken to them directly is associated with their vocabulary later in life.
Their language development is tied to that.
Their language development and their vocabulary.
Good to know.
That is super huge to remember. Another thing that surprised me when I was first doing my schooling is the majority of our language, understanding of how language works, like the grammar and things like that,
how it's all
are learned
structured
by the time we're 5. The rest of it, almost all of it, is actually vocabulary enhancement. So if you want your child to have a bigger vocabulary, which really helps with so many areas, especially in school and in professions, talk with your child. They need to hear more words. So talk to them one-on-one as often as you can.
A language-enriched environment is not only predictive of enhanced communication skills, but it's also tied to psychological adaptation, their ability to socially connect with people.
Yes.
They even predict the need for prison beds based on literacy rates. So we got to take this very seriously, and Vicki, you've given us some great pointers. Isn't she brilliant? That's why I brought her on board. I hope that this has been helpful to you, and we are honored to be on your team. Please join us at parentingpowerup.com, where we're forming a community of conscious, positive parents like you. parentingpowerup.com.
Her head was down, face locked onto the phone.